Good morning. We're here for another Facebook Live episode with me, Big B, the anti-lawyer lawyer. So today what I'm going to talk about is what happens when someone's injured at work. So I actually just came from meeting a client at a hospital who was injured on the job. And so this is basically how the process works, is if you're working for your employer and you're injured on the job, doesn't matter whether the employer was at fault for your injury or not. The way the system's set up is workers' compensation is the exclusive remedy. And what I mean by exclusive is you can't sue your employer. So you make a claim through workers' compensation and then you receive benefits as a result of that claim. The first part is they pay out up to 66 2/3 of your salary, which is paid in either every 2 weeks or every week. And then all of your medical bills are covered by workers' compensation as well. Now again, the workers' compensation is actually a very specialized field, and so whenever I come across an individual who's been injured on the job, I always bring in another lawyer. His name's Matt Fendon. He's a board-certified workers' compensation lawyer, board-certified by the Arizona State Bar. And so he comes in and explains the process much more better than I can. But that's, again, the exclusive remedy. So a lot of people are like, hey, listen, let's say you work at McDonald's and you're injured because one of the deep fat fryer overspills and you burn yourself. Your exclusive claim is through workers' compensation. You can't sue McDonald's. Let's say you work for Topgolf and something happens at Topgolf, like you fall from one floor to another. Your remedy's through workers' compensation. Can't sue Topgolf. That's the exclusive remedy, workers' comp. But what can happen is, let's say in a scenario where I met a client just now, a prospective client, where he is a subcontractor on a job. So his injury on the job, he makes his workers' compensation claim. He can't sue his employer, the subcontractor. However, on that job site, let's say there wasn't safety measures implemented properly by the general contractor. Well, then he has the ability to sue the general contractor. General contractor is called a third party. And in that case, he can sue the general contractor for his injuries. But whatever monies he receives from that lawsuit has to go back to pay whatever benefits have been paid out by workers' comp. So if workers' comp's paid out $100,000 for lost wages and for medical bills, then out of that lawsuit or claim with the general contractor, that $100,000 has to be paid back. Now, there's obviously some room within that can be worked here and there to try to not pay back as much. But in that scenario, almost exclusively, if you're injured at work, your injury's got to be fairly bad, fairly tragic, for it to make sense for you to retain a lawyer like myself to handle the personal injury side, again, within that example, the general contractor. And I say that because let's just say you sprain your ankle at work. Well, that's a very small claim. Your claim against workers' comp is very small. And then within that little scenario, there's probably no one else negligent for your injuries other than the employer. But let's assume in that subcontractor, general contractor, let's assume the employee working for the subcontractor, fractures his back, breaks both legs, and is paralyzed. That's a very bad injury. And let's assume then that general contractor is liable for all of those injuries. Well, those injuries, in my profession, the compensation available to that employee is going to be vague as it relates to that third-party claim against the general contractor. So in that scenario, I always say the juice is worth the squeeze, meaning you're going to get enough out of this lawsuit or claim against the general contractor and have the ability to pay back whatever workers' compensation is paid, and then have a chunk of money left over to compensate you for the injuries. So again, that's why, the bigger the injury, obviously, the bigger compensation or the bigger the lawsuit. So it sounds a little crude, but it is the way it is. And I always tell people, the system's set up the way it is, so it's good to have an advocate or someone argue on your behalf. In that workers' compensation claim, it would be Matt Fendon and myself arguing to make sure that all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted. So again, I hope that's a good enough glimpse into workers' compensation claims and how it works in reality. A lot of people find out that they can't file a claim against their employer and they're frustrated, and I get it, but that's the way the system's set up and that's the way the law is. So it always pays to get a good lawyer, because that lawyer is going to use his or her skill to such a fashion to maximize any and all benefits that are allowed within the law, and that's what you're entitled to when you're injured through no fault of your own. And so again, until next week, March 27th, please tune in. I'll also be on the drive home with Jody today on 910 Fox Sports AM. We'll be talking about the settlement with Lance Armstrong entered into, and also I think we're going to touch on the vast success of the Las Vegas Golden Knights, who swept through the LA Kings in the first series of the Stanley Cup Finals and going on and making history as it relates to any expansion team in any professional sport. So please tune in to that as well. Until then, tag your friends, share the video. As always, I appreciate you listening and supporting. And until next Friday, March 27th, this is Big B, the Anti-Lawyer Lawyer. Thanks.